Welcome to another session. I hope that you are well. Um, I have titled today's session, What It Says About You. What It Says About You. Um, for the past 2 weeks or more, I have been addressing a theme. The theme I labeled the OnlyFans phenomenon. Now, as I bring this whole series of sessions to its rightful conclusion, I think it's only fair that I have saved what I think the best for the last. And by making reference to the best, I'm not necessarily saying that the sessions will be any more profound than the ones I have covered already. Instead, what I mean is where the responsibility lies. Some sessions ago, I made it very clear that this new OnlyFans phenomenon, I lay down completely the responsibility at the feet of men. Yes, I would prefer if women had a lot more value assigned to their purity and their chastity, and more significance to the importance of their digital image. But I hold the men responsible. I am a traditionalist at heart, and when things go wrong, we look to the men. The reason being that we are the ones who are responsible by virtue of the role we play in society, the role we play in families, and the role we play in our respective fields of endeavor, whether vocation or avocation. Whenever a nation starts to go awry, whenever things start to go down the hill, as a matter of fact, historically speaking, when we look across time and without restriction to geography, whenever a nation that was successful starts to decline, the formula for that process of declining has been consistent. One of which is you lose your moral compass, you become very liberal, you become more progressive in ideas, you shun all the traditional values and traditions, you shun all the, you might say, the great inheritances from the past, and you throw all of them away. It always starts with the men, which is why there's a saying that I'll bring back the sons and try to connect them back to their fathers, and then the fathers to the sons, primarily because we are the foundation of nations, we are the foundations of families, we are the foundations in relationships, we are responsible. So I hope this whole OnlyFans phenomenon and its success, I know some people will call success the fact that so much money has been made. I do not consider that to be success. But despite that, I recognize that there's been some financial success for many people. Men are responsible primarily by virtue of the fact that the resources are being supplied by men. Almost 90% of all the transactions that take place go one way from men towards women. And therefore, if you stop the resources being transferred, the content creation dies. So I hold men responsible. And so in today's session, I think it's important that I address men, because I think it's so easy, myself included, to sit back and say all of these women and young girls who have lost sense of their morality and their values, and who have lost sense of the role that they play in society, and who are sharing videos and photographs of their half-naked bodies or fully naked bodies, and we say, how dare you? We put a pointer finger, and we sit on our thrones and our chairs and make it seem that we're holier than thou. It's very easy to do that. It's much harder to say, well, whenever we point the fingers, there's one pointing back at us, and I include myself in the same equation by virtue of the fact that I am a man. And it is for men to hold other men responsible, which is what this video is going to try to do, and the rest of the sessions that follow. as I bring this whole OnlyFans phenomenon to a close. I have to say, I tend to do series of sessions in which I take topics and I cover those topics over many series. I have to say this is perhaps the least interesting that I have ever done, primarily because in many ways there's some sadness that comes with dealing with things such as I have been covering. A question I have is, where are the men? Where are the men in society, both young and old, who in time past would have said, this is being incentivized by virtue of the men? To deal with today's session, let me address a few things. I'm going to be very direct because I tend to prefer speaking with men, to men, than I do speaking to women. When I speak to women, it might seem very harsh. When I address men, generally speaking are very, very understandable. Think about this as a big brother speaking with you or speaking to you, and take it as you wish. In any case, if it's not for you, eat the meat and spit out the bones. Some time ago, I did a session which I titled "A Guide to a Man's Value." At the core, I had about 10 sessions in which I covered the various ways that women could assess a man's value, but more importantly, how men can understand their value in the marketplace. There were several ways in which you can assess a man's value, and I provided acronyms, measurement standards. I'm going to address 3 of them. One is GV, gentleman's value. Number 2, CV, character value. And number 3, MV, or manhood value. 3 ways that you can assess a man's value. Now, this only 3. There are a lot more. But for the purpose of this conversation about OnlyFans, I think these 3 are directly connected. I'll make a statement first. I think, in my opinion, all of the men who subscribe to OnlyFans, especially sexual OnlyFans content, I consider most of you, or if not all of you, to be men without character, or with a very low character value, to be men with very low manhood value, and not to be gentlemen. Put it very, very bluntly. In many ways, I consider you to be to the bottom of the barrel. I covered in, I think, 4 sessions previously, a hierarchy, and I said legal prostitutes, escorts, porn stars, and OnlyFans model. I consider men who support any of this enterprise to be 10 times worse than all of these categories of women that I've described. I think it's disgusting. I think it's a shame that a man will allow himself to be a conduit through which our societal cohesion and norms are thrown away. Now, let me preface before I go further. Fundamentally, I see myself as you might say, a classical liberal. But also I see myself to be a conservative at heart. Conservative meaning there are certain things that I want to preserve, things that I love, things that I think are important for social cohesion. Classical liberal in the fact that I believe in fair exchange within certain areas. As with most issues, there's always a trade-off. The part of me that is classically liberal and the part of me that is a conservative is at war, because when it comes to economics, I'm happy for people to do as they please. Transactions to be had between 2 people without force or threat or coercion, and without affecting the right of other people to achieve their dreams and goals. I get that from an economic perspective. I do not accept that perspective when it comes to social issues. So when we talk about nation and community, there are certain things that I do not want to be commercialized, such as the value of a woman. I think women are too important to be objectified, especially in a commercial setting. Now, if a woman wants to give herself freely to various men at an individual basis, that's her priority and that's her decision to make. What I do not like is that we use the free market system as grounds for explaining the deterioration of our social norms, our ethics, our morality, and our value system. This is where I have things that are at odds. So it's important that I say this. those who purchase content from OnlyFans, sexual content, and those who sell sexual content on OnlyFans are engaging in a transaction that both parties consider to be either be equal or fair, in which case I have no issue with the choices both of you are making as functional adults. Because the part of me that is classically liberal would say it hasn't been by the use of threat, force, or coercion, and it doesn't necessarily impinge on the rights of other people to do as they please. However, if anyone who understands economics understands the power of incentives, if we incentivize men, and we did so for many years, that we would incentivize men by calling them heroes, and we will call on men to go to wars and die. So much so that if you were to look at a family that had sons, the son who went to war and died was called the hero, and the one who did not go to war always felt that he wasn't good enough. Why? From a societal perspective, there was an incentive created, the label hero, that caused men to go against their instinct, sometimes to go and die with no reward in place. Hence, with regards to OnlyFans, yes, it's a fair exchange between people. But if all men incentivize women to objectify themselves as sex objects, to the benefits of men, and also to the benefits of the women who receive, then in many ways that wouldn't be right. Now we know that about 90% of those who produce content online are not receiving a justified reward, whatever that number might be. Only a very small percentage of people are making all the money. The law of averages works. And unfortunately, what that means is that the more we incentivize the few, the more we draw in the many. And therefore our moral compass and our social ethics and the decorum that men used to have is being poured down the drain. And therefore I have an objection. There was a time when men were gentlemen, we had chivalry, there was a code of conduct, there was things that were permissible, but things that we would not do as gentlemen. Not because we could not, but because we have to think about the broader context of our social fabric. Yes, I can walk down the street and I can pay a prostitute to relieve me of my sexual needs and desires. Yes, I could do that. Between two people, it's a transaction. But the question is, what does it do to the social fabric? What are the unintended consequences of my decision? And my view is, when you have so many men doing the same thing, the unintended consequences can be great. So men, and I speak as one, we cannot criticize women completely because we are the ones to blame. So I started today's session by simply saying what it says about you. What it says as follows. A man's character value, let me start with CV, is a function of a number of things. But let me start as follows. Your philosophy will determine your principles, and your principles reinforcing your philosophy. But your philosophy will therefore determine your belief system. Your belief system will create what you consider to be right and wrong, which is where morality comes in. So your morals will come by virtue of your belief system. Your morals will create your values, a hierarchy of things that you consider to be important. Now, if you consider women to be very low on the totem pole to the point where you think of women as just objects, then that is your value system. Your value system will create ethics, your code of conduct, or your actions, which will create your character, which determines your lifestyle. So when I see men who are paying women on OnlyFans, I'm seeing men who have very low character value by virtue of the fact that they do not consider women to be high enough to be esteemed, that they think they can objectify these women. And they can encourage these women, some of them being very young women, to behave in manners and in ways that are not consistent with their long-term interest. So a man who has a low character value is a man who has not actually come into awareness of the importance of knowing that he has a responsibility beyond himself. I can sit across the table from a person who has a different moral code. And what we find is that our value systems are still aligned from the perspective that we hold certain things important. So certain social interactions important. I can sit across the table with a man who has a different belief system, a different philosophy, a different value system. However, in terms of our code of conduct and our actions, we may not be too dissimilar, though we could be, but may not be too dissimilar. And from a societal perspective, we see certain things as important. We see the importance of family. We see the importance of protecting women. We see the importance of actually recognizing that women are the ones who transmit our future and our culture. And therefore, what we give them is what they give back to us as offsprings and as a nation. And therefore, if we treat women like sex objects, then invariably, what we get in the future is a broken society. So, from a CV perspective, I would say men who pay for sex, and I'm talking about exchange. In as much as we call those women prostitutes and whores, those men are just as worse, and in my opinion, far worse, because they indicate something, that you do not have the ability, using the vernacular, street language, you have no game. You're pitiful. You're so pitiful that you have to sit behind your computers as incels and pay to see someone naked or see someone have fun doing something that you cannot and do not have the ability to go out and court a woman and pursue a woman and contend with other men for her affection, her love, her intimacy and sex. You're a loser, put it very bluntly. Now, envy has to do with manhood value. Every man is only as faithful as the temptations he has overcome. And every relationship with a man is only anchored on the temptations that he has overcome. Just temptations come by virtue of failures in life. As a man, you go through certain stages of your life. You're born male, you move into boyhood, hopefully you move into manhood, you become a gentleman, and then you pass away. Most of these men who subscribe to OnlyFans are male. They went through boyhood. They had an issue during their boyhood phase. Either they were never successful in sports, they were not successful in education, or they were not successful in sex, in soliciting or chasing women and using their accomplishments as the basis. So some of these men have grown into finding success monetarily, and therefore they think they can pay their way for a woman's affection and admiration. You're still a boy, in my opinion. If you pay for OnlyFans, if you pay for sex, if you pay prostitutes, if you subscribe to some of the silly things I hear about, feed photographs and all the nonsense, you're still a boy. You see, I have no issue with you being a boy, but if you want to remain a boy, then go to the corner and play with other boys. But let me move quickly because I think it's important. I made reference to a man is only as faithful as the temptations he overcomes, and there are three temptations, generally speaking, that we all have to go through as men. Number one is the temptation for sex. Secondly, temptation for fame or power. For fame and influence. And the third, temptation for power. The first hurdle you will cross as a man is sex. And those who pay for OnlyFans and those who pay prostitutes and those who pay for all this nonsense of sexualizing women are men who have failed the first temptation. They've been to the Garden of Gethsemane and they just cannot go ahead and accept the faith that they have. They will never carry their cross up their hill. Instead, they take the path of least resistance. They have wealth, they have money, they have resources, and therefore, having failed the first test of sex, and by sex, I'm not simply saying the physical sex, I'm saying you haven't developed the manhood, the game, the ability to, intersexual dynamics, I use the word a lot. This is a man who is socially awkward. And what it simply indicates is that there's so much growing up that needs to take place in you as a man. Your CV, character value, is at the bottom of the tank, and your manhood value doesn't exist. You're still a boy. And even at best, there are boys who are 18-year-olds who have much higher boyhood value than you. Now, what surprises me, and this is where perhaps I should drill into some of these men, the data suggests that the men who pay for content online, OnlyFans, fall within the age range of 35 to about 45. So, at least you think that these are young boys who are watching porn. And I have done sessions encouraging young men to let go of that porn addiction. There are men who in their 30s to 35s and 36 and 37 up to 45, sometimes even 50, who are purely responsible for this whole OnlyFans phenomenon. If you're 35, you're still a boy, but here's the difference. There are boys who are 18 who have more game than you do. So you should be ashamed of yourself. Now, let me go fastly into the whole concept of Gini, which is your gentleman's value. You're born male, you move to boyhood, you move through manhood, and you get to gentleman. See, if you were raised to be a gentleman, and if you're raised properly, there's certain things you don't do. One of those things is that you treat women as people worthy of honor. That's the word. You see, respect is earned. I don't respect anyone because respect is earned, but I can honor everyone because I have the ability to recognize what makes them unique. And men who see women as sex objects and just for their beauty, and therefore will incentivize them to behave in a manner, though nice in the present, is against the long-term interest. It means you have no gentleman's value. You're not a gentleman. There's certain behaviors that we used to train men to do. You know, I remember many years ago, I even when and this perhaps I should say this, even when we were still socially active, there were certain women we would meet, and I would use the word DTF, women who would DTF, that we would walk away from, because we understood, well, either the person was too vulnerable, or the person wasn't the right person to mess with. For example, you go out to a bar or club and you meet someone and you find them attractive and they find you attractive, and you note in your head that perhaps the person has had just a little bit too much to drink. And despite the interest the person might have on you, and even if you took her home, you realize, well, she seems a lot more drunk than I thought she was. You would pass on the opportunity to have your sexual desires met. You did the right thing in recognizing that she was vulnerable and you were not vulnerable, and therefore you had a responsibility. And as a man, your responsibility is to ensure you protect women in your presence. She may have said, yes, I'm ready, but as a man, because you had more responsibility, you could say, no, I'm going to wait until you sober up, wake up the next morning, and if you still find me attractive, if you still fancy me, we can go out for a meal on a different day. There were also men who would go out and interact with women who were, I call those who were raised to be wives. And they would come across men who were still in their playboy phase. And these boys would say, no, do you know what? Karma works. Karma is the bitch. I'm not going to stain myself with your purity. Despite the willingness on your part to exchange yourself freely, you are a wife. I am in the dating marketplace. You are in the relationship marketplace. You're looking for commitment in a relationship, and therefore, I would deny myself of the pleasure of your physical body and your company, because I think it's the right thing to do. This is a gentleman. These days, what we have is we have men who will incentivize women to behave in manners that are not consistent with the women's long-term interest. And I think most of you are scums, in my opinion. Let's just assume something, that you have a daughter. Perhaps the best way to think about this is, imagine yourself having a daughter, and imagine yourself as being perhaps a wealthy man. And across the road from you is another wealthy man. And this man just so happens to have more money than you do. And he tries to entice your daughter just to stand naked in front of him and to play with herself and do some sexual stuff. And he would give her some money. How would that make you feel? You know, how would that make you feel? You know, we a lot of the men who would pay for OnlyFans content, you're dehumanizing women. And if you can think about the girl in the picture, in the video, as being your sister, your daughter, your mother, then perhaps you might have some more humanity in recognizing that despite the pleasure you might get from the experience, sometimes it's best to walk away. And that's perhaps my call to adventure to most of you. There is a higher ground that you can take, and I would encourage you to take it. Now, most of you will not take it because most of you are incels. You are involuntarily celibate. You have no game. You have no presence in intersexual dynamics or in the marketplace. So you cannot compete. As a matter of fact, let me say something perhaps that I think is interesting. Men, we have a way that allows us not to recognize our shameful behavior, but allows us to continue to feel an addiction we have. We have a cave. The cave we have is as dark as possible. And in that cave, we have all of the things we do. Things that if there was light that came into that cave, if we were to shine some light into that cave, we would be embarrassed. But we do so because no one can see the cave. And the more we are left in that cave, the more we do things that we feel ashamed of. But we do so regardless. The question is, what is in your cave? Now we know, for example, that if we were able to publish the names of the men who subscribe to OnlyFans, most men will feel ashamed of it. And far worse they would feel compared to men who perhaps had Netflix accounts, or men who subscribe to ESPN, or men who subscribe to Amazon Prime. Will feel no shame if someone said, yeah, I do have an Amazon Prime account, no problem. Yeah, I subscribe to Sky Sports and I watch all the series. I subscribe to this and that. We'll have no shame. If you ask most of these men, do you have subscribed to OnlyFans? Most of these men will not say they do. Why? Because they feel ashamed deep down. They feel ashamed. That shame is true. That shame is because it indicates there's something lacking in your life. So it's important you get out of your cell and get into life. Get out there and interact with people. I tend to find, in my opinion, this is a personal opinion, and this could be completely wrong. Those who are in the STEM field tend to be the ones who subscribe to such behaviors on the basis that, I use myself as an example, if you were raised either in any of the STEM fields, we're usually socially awkward. And the last 2.5, 3 years with the lockdown has created and magnified that social awkwardness. Most people who are in STEM, especially those who do coding and all of that, can work from anywhere in the world. So most of you sit in your basements, most of you sit in your homes and your computers, and all you do is stay on the computer. And you haven't developed the social skills, the social gravitas, the social interest in going out there interacting with people. So we're socially awkward. It therefore becomes a convenient excuse for you to spend all of your time on the computers and then spend some of that money made from your time on the computers on entertaining yourself sexually. And how I don't understand how most men actually enjoy watching other people show their bodies, sometimes watching other people have sex and beat themselves and beat their sticks and feel good about themselves. There has to be something that makes you feel as though you're inadequate and you're insufficient. And the reason is because you are. Turn off your computers, go out into the world, contend with other people. You will fail. With each failure, you're developing your masculinity, your manhood value, your character value, and being a gentleman. Learn how to interact with women, learn how to humanize women. Now, if all you did is watch things online, and sexy women and sexy photos and sexy videos, then you get to see women as objects, which would mean it's like digging your own grave. When the time comes eventually, not only are you socially awkward, you've almost become a freak because of the things you've seen, and therefore you expect this lovely young girl to behave in a manner that is consistent with your online avatar. It wouldn't work. Now, one of the reasons I'm suggesting men get away from this pathway is because it will get worse. AI is on its way. Virtual reality is on its way. Some of you men are toast, just in the same way a lot of these women financially are toast. When AI arrives and virtual reality arrives in full, we would not need women because we can have computers give us the same experiences. Even more so, we can have it connect to our sensory faculties, and we can have the whole experience. Put on some VR device, and suddenly we can see the girl, and she's even touching us, and we can touch her as well. Most of you have a whole world of pain coming your way. It's best to walk away now. Get out of your cells and out of your basements and get into life. I'll conclude as follows. If you have an OnlyFans account where you're subscribing and paying women for sexual content in whatever form, you need therapy. And this is not a bad thing. This is not a judgmental position. As a matter of fact, this is a different from the position I've taken so far in today's session. We all need therapy. we need to go and get a checkup regularly to make sure that we are mentally in a good place. You might have issues from the past, you might have current issues, and this might be a way of you relieving yourself, but it's a wrong way. You need therapy to ensure that you sit down with someone who's a professional to help you get past and get through the challenges you have as a man. More importantly, you need a group. Perhaps here's a call to action. If you subscribe to OnlyFans, I'd like you, amongst the men who might be your friends, I'm sure there are some friends, and amongst the people who are your acquaintances, I'm sure there are, or those in your inner outer circle, I'm certain that they are. I want you to tell each of those people, both male and female, that you subscribe to an OnlyFans account or multiple OnlyFans accounts, and that you beat your stick regularly and derive pleasure from seeing women in a pornographic setting. And listen carefully to how those people react to the news you give them. Most people, although they may not necessarily tell you in a public setting, in their private capacities would say that something is amiss, something is wrong. I'll conclude as follows. There was a time when porn and pornographic content was available. We go back to when you had the Playboy magazines and all that, and people would pay to have those. And I never understood how men could pay to see women naked. I just couldn't understand it. There were men who were enjoying the company of those women, and there were other men who were paying to watch men enjoy the company of other women. What a weird setup, what a fucked up thing to have, and to be in the latter group. In any case, as they moved into online and digital world, that content was being consumed freely. There were men who said, well, I'll just enjoy the content, but I'm never going to pay a penny for it. How fast things change. These days, there are some men who subscribe on a monthly basis, as you would to Amazon Prime, where you're getting some value and some service. And these men subscribe and pay a certain fixed amount every month without realizing that you are digging yourself into the grave. I'm going to stop in today's session by saying as follows. I hold you responsible. Get out of your basement. Get out of your cells. Go out into the world, young men, old men, middle-aged men, and interact with people. I hope today's session has been useful.